$1 million is a benchmark for a lot of folks to retire. You see articles all over the internet about how much you need to retire, and for a long time, $1 million seemed to be the point that they settled on. I've done lots of videos about how that isn't actually true, but it still begs the question. If you have $1 million and you're at a normal retirement age, let's say that you're 65 years old, how much can you spend every month in retirement? I'm going to break that down today in a complete case study for you, showing you just that, as well as a couple of things that you might want to watch out for if this situation sounds like your own. So let's not waste any time. We're going to dive right in and set the stage. Today we're working with Michael Scott and his wife Holly. Michael's 65 years old and Holly is 63 years old. They both work for a paper company. They work for the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. Michael's a regional manager there. He's making $90,000 per year. Holly works in the human resources department and she's making $80,000 a year. Now they're looking to retire right now. And as you can see from their asset map, as far as their assets, they've got about $1 million. Michael's got $100,000 in a Roth IRA. He's got $400,000 in his 401k at Dunder Mifflin. Holly's got $100,000 in her Roth IRA as well, and $350,000 in her 401. So total retirement assets there of $950,000, or just under $1 million. They got a couple of 529s for the kids, $35,000 a piece, but we're not looking to use that to fund any goals. It's an asset, so we want to show it on the map, but we're not going to count it in the plan as far as meeting their goals. And then they've got a joint brokerage account. They've been watching my videos. They wanted flexibility to have a pool of non-retirement assets that they can use as well as they're funding their retirement. And so they've been building that up, funding that thing up, and it's up to $125,000. And then they got 40 grand in the bank. That's their emergency fund money, savings account stuff. Again, we're not going to use that for retirement income purposes, but it's important to note that they have it. Last pieces of the financial picture. They've got some life insurance. You see up here on top, they've got $500,000 a piece. It's term coverage, and so it's not going to last forever, but it does help protect from the loss of a potential Social Security check. So they're covering themselves there. We'll get into that in more detail later in the video. And then they've got a home worth about $400,000. They got a small mortgage on it, $50,000. That's the only debt that they have. Now, whether this situation sounds like you or not, these are the steps or the areas that you need to plan for, whether you're working with an advisor or you're working on your own. I won't spend too much time here because you've probably seen this before from some of my other videos, but here are the things that they should be watching out for. First off, we've got income planning, cash flow planning. Do they have ample income coming in? Risk management. What's their insurance coverage? What happens if one of them passes away? What happens if one of them gets sick? What happens if they need nursing care? Investment management. We need to make sure that the investments are aligned with their risk tolerance first off, and then secondly, that they're advancing them toward the appropriate goals. Tax planning. This is a big one. We talk a lot about this here. We want to maximize the amount of their money that they get to keep rather than paying in taxes. That's an important part of any plan. Retirement planning. Now, in this case, they're very close to retirement. They'd like to retire tomorrow, so there's going to be relatively fewer opportunities here than had we gotten to them 5 years or so early, but it's still an area that needs to be managed that we need to look for. And finally, estate planning. What happens at the end of the plan? Is a financial legacy important to them? Do we have current named beneficiaries? Do they have a will? Do they have a trust? All of this stuff needs to be incorporated into a good plan as well. So those are the areas we want to watch out for as we're building out their plan. By the way, if you're new here, if you haven't been here before, my name's Antonio Cibella. I'm a financial advisor. As you can tell, I work with folks who are at or near retirement to help them make the most of their retirement years. If you're planning your own retirement, check out the description of the video down below. I've got links to some of our best stuff down there, including some of our retirement guides that you can access if you're planning your own retirement. And so here we go. We've taken a look at what they've got. Let's look at things that might cause problems for them just from taking a brief overview. First off, depending upon the amount of income that they need, they're certainly not bulletproof from the question of running out of money. $1 million is a fine retirement portfolio, but not if you expect to draw, say, for example, $100,000 a year from it. We'll get to their income needs in just a second, but that's something we've absolutely got to watch out for here. Second, we can see that they have some life insurance, but again, depending upon the income need, one of them passes away early, that would eliminate a Social Security check and therefore cut into the income. That could be a potential problem depending again on whether the portfolio could weather it and how long the insurance coverage was. So we want to get some good information here on how long the coverage will last and then test what happens if one of them passes away. Really, the danger zone is going to be right after that insurance coverage expires. A lot of this will depend on their regular monthly income need. Like I said, we'll get to that here in just a second. Third, the other big thing that I see here is long-term care. They don't have any long-term care coverage in place. Now, they're in a tough spot here. And I'm going to get into this in more detail in a minute, but it's something that we want to watch out for. This might just be a bit of a hole in the plan. I'll explain why when we get into the what could go wrong section, but keep that in mind. That's something that jumps off the page here, no long-term care coverage. So keeping those things in mind, what is it that they want to have happen? What are Mike and Holly's goals for their retirement? Well, they tell me they'd like to travel and they intend to fully retire. There's no consulting, there's no part-time work. They want to retire and relax. So those are the two big ones. Additionally, you can see Michael is concerned with leaving a financial legacy. He wants to leave something behind to the kids. Now, what are they worried about? Well, Holly's worried about spending too much. She says that Michael's a bit of a spendthrift, and she's worried that they won't have enough income because they're not going to have income coming from work anymore, and that they'll burn through their assets with spending. That's something we'll have to talk about. And both of them share the same concern of running out of money. So we understand now what they want to have happen. The next question is, what sort of resources are they going to need to make that happen? Now, after some planning and conversations, we've come to see that they're going to need $80,000 a year in base retirement income, adjusting up each year for inflation. And they also want $12,000 a year in today dollars for travel every year for the next 12 years. That'll push them into their late 70s. At that point, they anticipate slowing down the travel, but $12,000 in today dollars each year for the next 12 years. Finally, as far as that gift, Michael would like to leave at least $200,000 in today dollars at the end of the plan, 30 odd years from now, for the kids. And so let's take a look at how things look. Base income, Social Security. On the Social Security side, Michael will get a hair north of $30,000 a year if he files right now at 65. Holly's going to get a little more than $24,000 if she files now at 63. We're probably okay with that as a strategy for the purposes of the video. In real life, we'd get into a deeper discussion on longevity. We'd look into the numbers a little bit more. Maybe we'd change their start dates. But for right now, we're going to assume that they start at retirement, which is essentially today. Let's look at how this shakes out. Can they meet their goals? So we're going to run the Monte Carlo. As you can see here, we're hitting 76% of the time on the Monte Carlo simulation. As a reminder, if you're new to these videos, it's going to take all of our input. What do they have in assets and resources? What do they want as far as income and meeting their goals? And it's going to run out 1,000 scenarios over the 30 odd years of retirement we're planning for with varying returns and tell us how often they can meet all of their goals. Now you can see 76% of the time they met their goals with some money left over. It's important to note in this case, one of the goals was leaving $200,000 in today dollars to the kids. I'm not put off as a result by the 76% right now. In an ideal scenario, you'd like to see a number that's higher than that, but as we get into these numbers a little deeper, I'll show you what I mean, because that's certainly a negotiable thing, and that's going to change things quite a bit. And so let's flip over into the play zone. You can see here we got a quick jump from 76% to 79%. That was simply by reallocating some of the investments to better match their risk. And so we've picked up a couple extra percentage points on the simulation there. Here's what I was talking about with leaving money, however. Remember, $200,000 that Michael wants to leave to the kids? Well, in 2056, which is where we're saying the end of the plan will be when Holly passes away, we've got to account for $440,000 plus at that point due to inflation. Now remember, that was a want. That was something they'd like to have happen. They could fully fund their retirement 79% of the time, and that can happen. What happens if we trim that down or eliminate it? So if we drop that gift to $100,000 in today's dollars, you can see it bumps us up to 83% of the time. If we didn't plan on leaving any funds at all, we're up to 88% of the time. As a baseline scenario, that's pretty solid. For comparison's sake, as you can see, if we leave the gift at full value, what if they said, nope, that's not something that's negotiable, we want to keep it in there, and they decided to each work one more year? We go up to 91%, which is fantastic, but it comes at the cost of trading another year of their life working. I'd rather see them retire now with gifting as something that's possible to be done down the line, depending upon how it works out, than continue to work. Now we know that our baseline here, $80,000 a year in income plus another $12,000 for travel for the first 12 years of retirement, looks good. We've answered the question of retiring right now, but now we've got to start to stress test it. Now we've got to get into what could go wrong. What are the things we need to plan for beyond just the baseline scenario that could wreck what is an otherwise very solid plan here? And so first up, we want to look at dying too soon or living too long. Now, I'm less concerned about living too long because we just tested all of that. And if they both stick around, we're testing to age 92 and 95, and things look pretty good, especially as it pertains to their base income needs. So I'm not overly concerned there. But what about passing away too soon? We know that a married couple with two Social Security checks, if one of them passes away, the smaller of the two checks disappears. In this case, that's going to blow a $23,000 or so per year hole in the income that we're going to have to subsidize from the portfolio. In a case where you might be tight on income, that can create a problem quickly. The fix there is carrying some life insurance into retirement long enough to cover that. Now remember, in this case, they both have $500,000 term life policies. Each has 10 years left on them. So passing away very early doesn't hurt the plan. As a matter of fact, I'll show you right here. Let's say that Michael passes away at 68. It actually helps the plan. Now, don't tell Holly that. Michael wants to stick around. He might need to watch his back a little bit, but it actually makes the math better because in this case, $500,000 of additional cash flows into the plan and only $23,000 a year disappears. And so from a can I die too soon standpoint, we don't have to really worry about that. What happens though if one of them passes right after the insurance coverage expires? Now we don't have $500,000 coming in. So we've got 10 years of coverage. What happens if he passes at 76? That's the worst possible time for him to go. Even at that, if we look at it, it doesn't break the plan. If he sticks around a while after that, we're good. An ideal scenario would probably be for them to have 15 years of coverage instead of 10, but that's not anything that's really going to rock the boat. So we're okay with that. We've passed through that gate, not overly concerned about living too long or passing away too soon. Now we're going to move on to the other one. I mentioned this earlier, long-term care. Neither of them has any long-term care coverage. If you're watching this video, no doubt you know that long-term care is incredibly expensive and it can ruin a plan. Let's get in here. We'll take a look and see, but I think this could be their Achilles heel. And so here you have it. If Michael needs care, let's say at age 80, for 3 years, $60,000 a year, that's a relatively minor need in the long-term care space, all things considered. Often it's a lot more expensive than that, but it really starts cutting into the plan. You can see what's happening. And God forbid, if it's worse than that, if he gets into a chronic situation, something like Alzheimer's, we bump this to 7 or 8 years of care, you can see that it blows up the plan. I mean, base income at that point, without even having any of the travel, only 65% of the time, and it gets worse from there. And so here's the thing. Being that they're already 65 and 63, long-term care insurance is going to be expensive. It might not be a deal breaker cost-wise, but we need to get into that. We need to have a deep conversation there and try to find them some coverage because we can see that this has the potential to wreck the retirement. For what it's worth, and this is not a long-term care commercial, but if you have assets to protect, you should look into getting some coverage for yourself, for your spouse, and the sooner you do it, the less expensive it's going to be. There are lots of options about it, but you need to get something in place. Now, if you happen to be watching the video and you're 30 years old, don't worry about long-term care coverage today. That's not something that you need to worry about. But if you're north of 50 and you're on a path like this one, you've got some assets that you're going to need to protect, look into coverage ASAP. It's cheaper the earlier that you get it. All things considered, we found a pretty good situation here for Michael and Holly. They look to be on a pretty good path for themselves. Now, on a lot of these topics, I only provided kind of a general overview today, which is what we do in videos like this so that they're not 2 hours long. If you're interested in some more specifics on some of this stuff, in particular, how to structure out the retirement portfolio, check out this guy right over here.